Heya player, let's talk about why we play Helldivers 2. Specifically, let's talk about the warbonds and the most recent warbond, the Polar Patriots. In a recent poll, the designers asked us what we thought of this warbond, and as you can see, the responses were not overwhelmingly positive. You also do not have to spend much time on YouTube to find a video explaining to you how dissatisfied this YouTuber was with this warbond. The majority of respondents report that they just didn't like the new warbond for unspecified reason. One narrative that has been circulating the community is that it is because the weapons are not good, but I do not think that is exactly the case. I do think there are issues with the weapons, and I will get back to that. Let's look at the previous warbonds first to try and understand where I'm coming from. The first warbond we got when the game was released was the Steel Veterans. Upon release, this warbond had the following weapons. The Liberator Concussive. This weapon was not considered very powerful, and it's still not very powerful. It had the Breaker Incendiary. This weapon only became viable within the last couple of weeks when they patched and fixed the damage from burning. Then it had the Dominator, which was overall considered a great weapon. And lastly, the Senator, which receives a significant damage buff in the most recent weapon rebalance patch, making it a very nice weapon to use now. But upon release, it was cool, but maybe not the most powerful. Overall, the weapon power in this warbond upon release was not considered very powerful. The sentiment in the community was back then that it was better to unlock the weapons in the standard warbond before getting these special weapons. So on a useful weapon scale, this warbond probably had 1 out of 4 good weapons upon release. The rest were curiosities at best. The next warbond that was released was the Cutting Edge warbond. If you look around, you'll find that this is generally still considered the best warbond out there. When it was released, it had the following weapons. It had the all-powerful sickle. This weapon has been the favorite of many since release, and for good reasons. It was back then and is still considered a great weapon. Next up was the Punisher Plasma. It was generally considered an okay weapon, but not a great weapon. It got quite a bit more useful after the last weapon patch, improving the damage dealt in the explosion area, making it quite a good weapon now, but it wasn't back then. And then there was the Blitzer. The Blitzer was a cool idea, but it didn't deliver. It got a significant power boost in the last weapon patch, increasing its rate of fire by 50%. And lastly, the Dagger Laser Pistol. I still don't see people using this even after the damage boost in the last weapon patch. So all in all, from a weapon perspective, this warbond had maybe 1 out of 4 good weapons upon release. As an honorable mention though, I will say this warbond also had the stun grenades, and they are probably the best stun grenades in the game, so half an extra point for that. Moving on, we got the Democratic Detonation warbond. On the weapon side, this warbond contained the Adjudicator, which was discarded as soon as people picked it up. This weapon became much better after the rebalance and after it was moved to the assault rifle section, but it was definitely not considered a good weapon when this warbond came out. Then there was the much discussed Eruptor. This was a good weapon when the warbond was released. Now, maybe less so, but upon release, this was definitely considered a good weapon. The Exploding Crossbow, on the other hand, was not. Not much to say here. I just never see anyone running the crossbow, even after the weapon patch. People just want to use other weapons. And lastly, the warbond had the grenade pistol, which was generally considered a good addition to the game, a very powerful option with a lot of utility. All in all, if we look at these first 3 warbonds, upon release, they all mostly had 1 weapon that was useful and 2 that were not. And looking at the Polar Patriots, this warbond is not much different in this regard. We got the Tenderizer, which, when we just consider its viability, is a perfectly balanced weapon. It is a low recoil liberator. We got the Pommeler, which various YouTubers will tell you is a great option to run with, and I agree, it's a very good weapon. And if we look at the last page of the warbond, we got the Plasma Purifier, which is not especially good. So, actually, on the weapon front, in terms of balance, I think this warbond did as well as the previous ones. It was not perfect, but there was something in there that was useful and something that was useless. So, was it just a negative halo effect that made all these people say they did not like the warbond? The halo effect? No, no, not that halo. This halo. It's a psychological effect that makes you see things in a more negative light if you have a negative preconception. For example, you may think worse of a piece of art made by a politician that you disagree with just because you see everything that politician is doing in a negative light. The same thing could be true here. There was the Sony issue, and there's been a series of negative reviews online of the warbond that people may have seen before trying the warbond, if they even have tried the warbond. And that could, of course, have a negative effect on the war bond. I do not think this is the whole story, though. As you can see, I responded that the flavor of the war bond was off, and I will show you why I think that is. I think the problem with the war bond was something that is much more important for a game. The war bond did not feel good. It was not able to tell me a small story about the war bond through its design. Its narrative value was near non existent. A quick glance at the three initial war bonds demonstrate this. The Steeled Veterans. The name has a double meaning. A soldier forged in the hell of war. We get that literally. Soldiers with limbs replaced by steel, limbs they've lost in war. We get weaponry that pound like a hammer and utilize fire like a forge. This narrative holds up. Next, we got cutting edge. And if I was asked you to complete that sentence, you would probably say technology as the next word. And that is what we get. The weapons are gadgety and are all energy based. Even further, the armors are designed to protect the wearer against this unstable new technology. Lastly, we had the democratic detonation, and I personally think we saw the decline of good warbond design with this one. While the weapons lived up to the expectation, they were exploding. The armors did not have a new unique passive, and nobody complained, but still, the flavor was demolition, and we got a range of new options for that with this warbond. If we look at the Polar Patriots imagery and think about the fantasy of the grizzled warrior in the polar night, for me, that fantasy brings imagery of space wolves from Warhammer, Vikings, Star Wars, and the snow planet Hoth. Polar Patriots should be tough survivors with weapons that can punch holes in ice. The Tenderizer does not fit that description. Make it a hard hitting, slow firing weapon. The Pummeler is good as it is. The Purifier, while the idea with a charge up weapon is cool, it should have been a charge up weapon that slows the enemies, just like we're slowed by the acid of the hunters with the green fumes around us. This weapon should slow other enemies with blue fumes. Maybe if you shoot two legs of a charger, it wouldn't be able to charge anymore after you slowed it like this. While the pistol is a good weapon, giving us a sort of break action shotgun would have fed into that gritty narrative much more. And the grenade should definitely not have been a fire grenade. I love this grenade, it's fun to play with, but it should have been a blizzard in a bottle, creating an area that is obscured and slows enemies inside, just like the blizzard environmental effect. And this brings us to the armors. Generally, they look okay. It is problematic, though, that these two armors are identical in design and have vastly different abilities. It makes no sense. It is like wanting apples that taste like bacon, except here the apples taste like stale bread. I've said it before, I think all warbonds should have one unique ability that all the armors have in common. And this ability should be unique to this warbond as well, may be available in the superstore. I've previously talked about how armors should have a combination of two armor passives to mix and match, except heavy armors, which should have three armor passives. The passive they should have had in common should be one that would allow them to walk more securely on slippery surfaces and up steeper hills. Further, the armor should have been distinct to tell a unique story for each of them, fulfill that different power fantasy for each of them. Lastly, the booster should probably have been one that reduced the slow effect of environmental effects such as blizzards and tremors to fulfill that power fantasy of the grizzled warrior just barely making it through the blizzard. Looking at the war bonds that were released previously and now, I do not think the quality of the weapons in the war bonds have diminished. The reason that the Polar Patriots received an icy reception from the community was the effect of the poorly flavored war bond that met a community that was more critical of Arrowhead's doings. I think Arrowhead should redo the war bond as I have described above and their next warbond needs to be dripping with flavor of a certain power fantasy. In my next video, I will present what I think that warbond could look like. I will present the warbond I've named the Silent Majority. All that said, thanks for watching this long, listening to my thoughts, and until next time, players gonna play, haters gonna hate, and I'm just gonna sit back and play nice with others. See you later.